What up, YouTube family? Pete here, and I want to say thank you all for subscribing to my channel. We're over 3,000 subs now. It was just over a month ago, and I was under 500. So, page is growing like a weed. Thank you guys for the shares, the comments, all the positive feedback. We're really enjoying it. So today I'm going to bring you a video on a tree planting, and I'm going to warn all you people that can't hang in for more than a couple of minutes. Now's the time to go. This is probably going to be a 10-minute video or so. I really don't want to rush this one. Try to give it to you at a slow pace, very detailed, because I feel this is probably one of the most important parts of installing a food forest, the fruit trees, especially the grafted fruit trees. Today we're going to be planting a mango, and something like a mango could be here 100 years. It's going to outlive me. I'm actually removed a tree from this space or area, not exact location, an Anna apple, and we find apples don't do too well here. We're not quite getting the chill hours, even though this apple has been reported to have lower chill hours and fruit in this part of Florida. This was a bad location. This is another learn by my mistakes. This area has maybe been planted, I think we're coming up on just 2 years now. It's a very young planting, and things like apples, things that go deciduous, do much better in a full sun application. So, here on Sand Hill Farm, we have a lot of things planted in more of that dappled light situation, and the things that are thriving in the dappled light or more of those subtropical species that don't drop their leaves, don't go to sleep in the wintertime. So, definitely apples are not one for the understory. Apples really aren't one for this part of Florida when we can grow so many other, interesting fruits. So I'm gonna get on to the tree planting demo for you. I'm gonna talk to you a little bit about the supplies I have for the job. Here's that apple. I might stick that in a pot and give it to a friend that lives up in North Florida. So if it makes the transplant, I will give this thing away. I think it was honestly just a rough looking tree in the nursery. Rather than sell it to a client, we planted it here on the farm to see how it would do. Fail. So that is gone. Here's the tree that we are planting today, and it's going to go very close to the same location. And you can see that's where I pulled that apple up out of the ground. There's actually some exposed mycelium in the area, and there's a little bit of moisture because we've had to run the overhead irrigation here about once a week just to try to keep our soils damp here in Florida. So something I'll point out about mangoes, this is a Venus variety. It's a new variety of Zills. These are super tough trees. The only thing it isn't bulletproof about it is the cold hardiness. So we're up here in 9B, about 20 miles north of Tampa, and I would say if y'all want to push mangoes, planting those later season varieties like I had talked about in my mango video is going to give you a much better chance of that fruit set. So Keat, Kent, Palmer, Beverly, Venus, there's a couple other new varieties that have just come out. It's going to give you a much better chance of getting that fruit set because it's flowering later, much less chance of that last frost affecting the tree or damaging it. So, most important part of planting a tree, I'm going to tell you all first thing, you cannot plant a tree too high. You cannot pack a tree too tight. So before I get down there on the ground with this tree, and I had started to kind of say mangoes are tough. This tree's been sitting here for 2 weeks. I'm a busy guy. I haven't had a chance to get out here with my wife and make this video. The wind has been just horrible here in Florida. Today is actually a semi-calm day, so perfect opportunity. I was home in the office. Hey babe, let's get out and make that video. So thanks Melissa for making this happen. You'll see here on the bottom of the tree, that's the graft. As the tree grows, sometimes people will call that the clubfoot. So that was a seedling, and then this is the rootstock, or this is the scion up here on the top. So this has been the selected variety of tree. So this is that selected Venus. They took that cutting off that mature tree and they spliced the two together. I'm going to be giving you guys a grafting video here too before you know it to kind of get a little bit more in depth for grafting. We've had a lot of questions about that. So with this being a grafted tree, really need to keep that graft up above that that surface of the soil. It's very important to plant this tree high. So get the depth for that as I set the tree in the ground with you. And we're going to keep that mango maintained. This is going to be a tree that stays in maybe that 8 foot tall. Might come out a little bit more towards the edge with it because we do have a guava here. I have a wax myrtle nitrogen fixture on this side, a banana here in the back. There's some Mexican sunflower. That's another one that really doesn't do well in the shade. And a loquat. We have some bamboo here in the back, and I believe a lot of these species actually originally were kind of very dried out. We found with bamboo, yes, these are clumping varieties, but those roots can really suck an area dry. So last year we put a root barrier in on the other side of this food forest. It goes about 1.5 feet deep, We use some galvanized metal. I'll make a video on that. We've already had some people ask us in the bamboo video, how to do the root barrier, but there's a barrier there now, and we've noticed that these plants have started to thrive a little bit, since we've done that. So this area is greening up a bit. I guess first thing I'll talk about is the shovel that I'm going to use to plant this tree. I have this one hanging out in the shed. I probably haven't used a shovel like this in 10 years. This was probably just given to me by a client. Shovels like this they don't last long with the commercial company. This is the type of shovel that we use when we're installing a fruit tree. Night and day difference. This is called a pony shovel or a cap rock shovel. This shovel is available on our Amazon store. And I would highly suggest, if you're going to be planting a lot of fruit trees, to invest in a good shovel. This is 20 bucks. This is probably 60, 70 bucks. This is going to last you for life till it gets lost or stolen. This is going to break very soon. So another thing is, this shovel is pointy and it has this arch to it in the back. Now these plants that we're planting, these trees that are going in the ground, they're in pots that are flat on the bottom. This is much more close to that flat on the bottom. So this is going to not over dig the center of that hole. We really don't want to loosen up that soil at the bottom of the hole. So, pony shovel is great for cutting roots. Something else I didn't mention, this shovel's got some weight to it. It's probably, 40 or 50 pounds. So I keep a hand file on us when we're out doing jobs, constantly sharpening the shovel. We probably have 10 of these in the trailer. We actually have one that we dedicate to roots only that stays much sharper, and then one that's more for planting. It doesn't need to be as sharp. It can be a little bit duller. So the other second item that I'm going to use for placing this tree in the ground is just a metal hard rake. Another thing that we use all the time. These have been with me forever. These tools last when you invest. This is not a wood handle. This isn't going to break. This is a welded head. This is going to be on for 10 years. Like I said, the only time we lose a tool in my business is if it gets lost or stolen. Maybe ran over with the tractor, but otherwise this stuff holds up. Here's that cheap wood one. I should just throw this away now. Figure it's good for showing y'all what not to buy. So we'll step over to the tree planting spot. I'll go over the amendments here right after I prep the location. And something I was getting to say was, this mango's been sitting down here for 2 weeks. I've never hand watered it once. These are super tough trees. They can handle extreme drought. They can handle extreme water. I've seen these growing out of water for months at a time. So mangoes are pretty bulletproof, other than being just not super cold hardy. But it seems like the seasons are changing. Before you know it, I'll be growing early season mangoes, and we have actually fruited early season mangoes here. So you can see I'm pulling back to this food forest, and I haven't even hit the native soil. I'm just, I think, coming up on it, getting below that mycelium layer. I'm just gonna finish out the rest of that by hand. And there's a lot of tree planting videos out there. It can be quite confusing, how to plant the fruit tree. And I'm not going to say that my way is the best, but I am going to tell you that I've planted thousands of trees, and I've learned the hard way. And you can listen to anybody you want, but I can promise you, this is the successful way to, get a long-term fruit tree here, especially something like I said, a mango. We're talking about a 100-year lived tree. So I just hit that native soil. This has been pure sand. That means that we amended this space in probably 12 inches of mulch originally. Now it's dropped down to about 6 inches, maybe 3 or 4. There's that mycelium in there, which is kind of like I said, that internet of the soil. That's the native soil. So that's the native soil. I'm gonna just cut that up just to loosen it just a hair. I'm not going into it very far at all. I was actually surprised by the amount of mulch we had in this area. The other spot I had chosen only had about 1 inch of mulch, which probably would have been a little more ideal. I'm gonna pull this back, and that's probably well over deep enough. So this mango has not been in a pot for a very long time. It's not very root bound, and certain trees like sapodillas and jackfruits, you really got to be very careful when you pull them out of the pot. The roots are very delicate. You can kind of disrupt the tree. Something like a mango, if this was heavily root bound, I'd probably get in here with my Felco pruners and cut those roots up a little bit, let that tree kind of explode. I find that it's never good to plant a big tree. I've seen little 3-gallon trees kick 45-gallon trees' butts going in the ground. That 45-gallon tree has spent years in a pot. This tree hasn't been in a pot very long. We're not even talking about a year, folks. This tree's ready to go. It's on that growing stage. So you're going to see a lot of tree planting videos like I mentioned, and I would tell you the number one mistake, unless you have nematode-ridden soils like we do and you're planting a fig or a banana, you don't put anything at the bottom of the hole. If you stick this tree in a big hole of rich compost, of nutrients, the tree's going to be perfectly happy. the roots aren't going to want to search out. By putting it in the native soil like I'm about to do, that tree is going to go looking for those nutrients. So I'm going to use all of my amendments on the top of the plant, and I'll show you how I do that, and we call that top dressing. So like I said, it wasn't very root bound. I don't need to do any kind of root pruning here. I'm literally just going to set that tree down in the hole, and this is almost borderline too deep for me. I would not go any deeper than that, and that's about crown of the tree is maybe 2 inches, higher than the actual ground surface over here on the mulch. Another thing I'll point out is, mangoes don't like a lot of nutrients. They don't like a lot of fertilizer. If you have one in the middle of a chemically treated yard and it's not fruiting, it's probably because it's just getting loaded with too much, fertilizer, and it's not liking it. These will grow in pure sand, pure crap, for the most part. So I've got about 3 or 4 inches, that bottom part of the tree down there, hard packed, like I said, with that native soil back around the tree. You can't pack too tight, you can't plant too high. It is very important though when you're planting high that you're creating a plateau and not creating a mountain. You want to give space for the water to sit. You don't want it running down off the top. So now we're getting ready to amend the tree. First thing that I'll put on there is going to be some organic compost. So I'll just kind of go down the list of the amendments we're going to use, then I'll apply them to the tree. In this first bucket right here, I have our biologically active hardwood mulch. So this is our oak mulch with the leaves and the twigs like I talked about in my mulch video. Kind of starting to break down. It already has mycelium on it. Here we have some organic compost with some worm castings mixed into it. Like I said, this has been sitting here about 2 weeks now, so it's kind of drying out a little bit. I had a garbage can over the Azomite just in case it did rain. We have some Azomite, that's going to give us our trace minerals. I have some organic compost. This actually has micronized compost tea on it. It's just a 234, very low. I have some biochar. So here's the biochar we've been shipping out in the buckets. And ash. It's just ash from a fire, like I had talked about being very good for bananas. We also use this on all of our fruit tree installs. So I'm going to start with the compost. And in some situations with the mango, I put pure sand around it. It really doesn't need this good soil. This is going to help to retain some moisture for us though. Have to do less hand watering as we're, basically establishing this tree. I'm going to build that up all the way around the top, and you're very much, I can't tell you all how many failures I've seen from people burying trees too deep. You don't know it, you start off putting trees in the middle of your grass. Next thing you know, your backyard turns into a food forest and all the grass is gone. You have to really think about that when you're planning out these systems, So you plant this at ground level in the middle of the backyard, 2 years later it's a food forest. This tree's buried this deep, it's never going to produce, it's never going to do well. So planting trees high, I can't say that enough. That's going to be my compost around the top of the tree. Next I'm going to put the biochar on there. So y'all have asked, how do we use biochar? We call this top dressing. This is going on the top of the tree. And how much biochar do you use? Honestly, just comes down to cost. It can get expensive. I don't think you could overdo the biochar. But yes, it could break the pocket. This stuff isn't cheap, but it's game changing. This is one-time use. This is supposed to hold nutrients for thousands of years, retain moisture. This is going to be here feeding this tree when we don't have rain for 3 months like we've had right now. Really want to pack that nice and tight. I'm going to add just a little more. I want to get this level all the way around the tree. And the rest of my amendments will just be a top dress. So I'll take a handful of the Azomite. This is another one. This is a rock dust. This will stay in the soil for supposedly thousands of years. This is always going to be here. This will build up. This is that ash from the fire. Had a piece of charcoal in it. And this is that organic fertilizer. Definitely want to get fertilizer, especially this organic stuff, down below the soil of the mulch. We don't want to let this sit in the sun. So this, this mango is kind of on this edge, definitely moving further and further away from the backyard with our mango plantings here as the winters get more mild and mild. So most of my other mangoes are in a deep shade situation. This one's gonna get a few hours of dappled light, or more than dappled light in the morning time. Next, we've got the mulch. Notice the first thing I do, I pull that mulch away from the collar of the tree. I can't tell you how many homeowners I've seen. First thing I do is go to the house and they're like, my tree is suffering. It's the first thing I check. Usually the graft is too low below the surface. There's ants in there. So as soon as that tree starts to get weak, that's when the pests start to come in. That's when it starts to get affected. If you have a sad tree, go out and see how deep it is. And you can pop it up and try to replant it. So it can't overpack. I'm really trying to stomp this in there. This is a developed food forest, so it's not as plateaued as you would normally see it. If I would have dug an inch or two and hit soil, this tree would have looked much higher, So yes, if I'm coming off the top of the tree, I'm still a few inches higher than the existing soil there on the outside. But I would highly suggest high, tight, and don't fill your hole with nutrients. Good dirt. I can't tell you how many people I've given this same advice to, and they've had problems down the road, and they call me and they didn't listen. And I've had, the same experience myself, and I've learned from my mistakes. So it's another one. I used to plant trees, at ground level, and a couple years later they started getting a little low, and I realized, oh my gosh, learning from my mistakes here. So I want to share that with y'all. I think it's very important. These trees could be here 100 years. They're going to outlive us, especially if we keep having mild winters. This is a grafted tree, so this could fruit in a year or two for us. This mango already has 2 tips on it. I'm going to go ahead and tip it again. So very important with mangoes too, if I want to create more branches, this tree is going to fruit off of its tips. I'm going to cut this tip off. I'm going to cut this tip off. When it grows back, it's going to grow 2 again. So this tree's already split once, it's going to split again. I want to shape this tree. I want to open this tree up. I want to create a form with multiple tips, multiple areas to fruit like that. Like I said, we're going to keep these short, compact trees. So yes, this tree will get pruned, once it's developed to a certain size, that once a year, typically right after it's fruited. So hope you all enjoyed.